A third man falls between them. His parachute didn't open, so he passed on influence. Out of nowhere somebody starts shooting at them and Royce moves rapidly to avoid the disasters and show up behind the shooter. Nikolai is a Russian commando and the last thing he recollects as being at war. Royce and Kachilo had a similar encounter. They were going during their time when a light sparkled and taken them out. Then they showed up overhead. At the point when they pivot, they find Isabel, a sharpshooter from the Israel Protection Powers, pointing her weapon at them. She clarifies she's been for some wildernesses, however she can't perceive this one and that she saw more individuals falling. They consent to leave together to search for the others, uninformed that close by Yakuza Part Hanso is watching them. He attempts to follow them, yet when his shoes contact the mud, Hanso chooses to take them off. The gathering goes further into the wilderness and finds two men in a battle. Death row prisoner remains in Mombasa, a revolutionary from a South African association. The men end their battle when they see the others and consent to stay together on the grounds that their solidarity in numbers then stands. Specifies some person on a tree. This is Dr. Edwin, whose parachute stalled out in a branch. Royce salvages him by shooting the branch and making him fall into a lake. Then at that point Edwin has a similar story as every other person without any thought of where their solidarity in numbers then stands. Specifies some person on a tree. This is Dr. Edwin, whose parachute stalled out in a branch. Royce salvages him by shooting the branch and making him fall into a lake. Then at that point Edwin has a similar story as every other person without any thought of where they are, or alternately what's happening. As the gathering continues to move, Isabel needs to overlook Stan's unpleasant and grimy remarks. In the end they track down Hanso in the mud, yet he isn't stuck, he's frozen in light of the fact that he's tracked down an odd emblem with loads of bones under Mombasa. Remarks that some tracker should be taking prizes and that in his way of life the champion with the best prizes gets the most regard. Nikolai thinks this is some test, yet Isabel differs in light of the fact that not every one of them are military. Cucho believes it's a payoff. Stan says it's an investigation, and afterward out of nowhere they're contemplating whether they're dead and this is damnation. Royce quiets them generally down and says the explanation doesn't make any difference. What they need is to figure out how to get away. The gathering follows Royce, and as they cross the wilderness Nikolai needs to contact a beautiful bloom. Nonetheless Edwin stops him, making sense of it's toxic and would cause complete loss, and says the explanation doesn't make any difference. What they need is to figure out how to get away. The gathering follows Royce, and as they cross the wilderness Nikolai needs to contact a beautiful bloom. Nonetheless Edwin stops him, making sense of it's toxic and would cause complete loss of motion. Nikolai is appreciative and vows to safeguard Edwin. Later on, in the wake of propelling some more, Isabel requests that Royce delayed down and shows him something. She makes an ad-libbed compass and puts it on the water, yet it won't quit going around and around. Consequently Royce calls attention to that the sun hasn't moved since they shown up, so moving around will be hard. He likewise lets Isabel know that since they're all hazardous warriors in addition to a specialist, his hypothesis is that they were painstakingly picked. Isabel surmises Royce used to be a warrior before he turned into a hired fighter, yet he will not say more. After seriously strolling, the gathering goes over an enclosure and cautiously eliminates the sheet that covers it just to think that it is vacant. It seems the cage was dropped just like them and the blood stains indicate some creature was in it. When they look up they find a bunch of fallen cages stuck on the trees, meaning they'll be having lots of company. Then the group keeps going and suddenly Mombasa trips on a branch accidentally, triggering a trap. Soon a bunch of things are trying to kill them, a huge swinging tree trunk, a bunch of falling wood stakes, and even a huge bear trap, but they dodge them all. Isabel runs and falls into a hole, managing to survive by holding onto the edge. Royce runs to her and saves her right before she falls. Then Isabel uses the scope on her weapon to find the person behind the traps, only to discover he's already dead. Judging the decomposition, Edwin mentions the guy has been dead for 2 weeks, and Nikolai checks the pockets to discover he used to be a USA Special Forces soldier. She falls. Then Isabel uses the scope on her weapon to find the person behind the traps, only to discover he's already dead. Judging the decomposition, Edwin mentions the guy has been dead for 2 weeks, and Nikolai checks the pockets to discover he used to be a USA Special Forces soldier. Royce realizes the traps weren't for them but for whatever killed the guy, which he believes to be much bigger than them because of the trap's position. As they start moving again, Mombasa thinks there's something among the trees but decides to ignore it. However, he isn't wrong. Someone is watching them with infrared technology and repeating anything they say. Moments later, they manage to reach the edge of the jungle and look up at the sky only to receive a huge shock. A bunch of weird planets and stars indicate that they're not on Earth. Royce decides they must find who put them here to ask them to send them back. The group re-enters the jungle and suddenly a drone quickly flies near the heads. Freaking stands out. He complains about his lack of guns and threatens Mombasa for one, but before they can start another fight they hear growling coming from the jungle. At that moment a horrible beast appears running toward them and the group immediately opens fire. The beast is quickly killed, but there's a bunch more of its kind coming since they have no guns. Edwin and Stans begin running away. A monster comes after Edwin as he trips, but Isabel kills it with a perfect shot while Nikolai and Hanso shoot down another beast. Royce kills one by using just his knife. Stans is jumped on by a monster too and tries his best to defend himself with a knife. Luckily Mombasa arrives and kills the creature with a few shots. Edwin climbs a tree while Isabel is cornered by a beast and she considers self-deleting, but at that moment a whistle can be heard deep in the jungle and all the beasts suddenly run away. Afterward the group reunites and reaches a simple conclusion: they're being hunted. Those creatures were hunting dogs testing the enemy and the whistle called them back. The planet is a huge hunting ground and all the beings that are brought in the caves serve as the prey. Suddenly Mombasa notices someone is missing and they hear Kuchio's voice calling for help among the trees. The group follows the noise and finds Kuchio on his knees because of severe injuries, so Isabel tries to come closer to help him. However, Royce stops her and says it's a trap, proving it by throwing a stone. Stans points out there's nothing they can do for him and the other guys agree, ignoring Isabel's protests. As the men leave, Isabel decides to end Kuchio's suffering and shoots him. However, she can hear him asking for help again. Isabel runs away as it's revealed that Kuchio had been dead all along and the voice had been a recording used by the hunter in the Who is watching now too. The group keeps walking for a while and Royce analyzes the few clues he has to guess how the enemy behaves. This hunter wants them to run, so Royce thinks they should follow the dog tracks and get to the hunter first. Moments later the group finds a camp and is disgusted by the creepy sight: the bodies. The group keeps walking for a while and Royce analyzes the few clues he has to guess how the enemy behaves. This hunter wants them to run, so Royce thinks they should follow the dog tracks and get to the hunter first. Moments later the group finds a camp and is disgusted by the creepy sight: the bodies of various different races are hanging on stakes and the ground is covered with the remains of various creatures, confirming that not only humans are brought to this planet as prey. At the back of the camp they're shocked to find a huge ugly creature tied to a stake known as a predator, while Royce notices that Isabel is having a weird reaction to it. Nikolai comes closer and pokes the alien with his weapon only for the creature to roar at them because it's actually alive. Isabel says they should leave immediately, but Edwin notices Royce is gone. Suddenly a bunch of spears pop out and kill Mombasa, causing Royce to rush out from the shadows and start firing wildly. The other guys help him and such a huge wave of bullets reveals that the hunter is also a predator using a cloaking device. The group begins running away as the predator shoots at them with lasers, causing explosions and flames all over the place. As they escape, the group ends up rolling down a hill and falling off a cliff into a river. They start swimming to safety, unaware that a drone detects their location and takes it back to the camp, where it's revealed that there are a total of 3 hunting predators. Once the group is safe in a cave, Isabel hits Royce for using them as bait. However, Royce doesn't regret it because now they finally know who is after them and some details about their strength and hunting methods. Then Royce confronts Isabel about her reaction to the predator, saying she must have seen one before. Isabel admits she's heard a story saying that aliens that looked like these ones were seen in 1987 in Guatemala, which is a reference to the first movie. Royce wants to set up a defensive perimeter and force the predators into a choke point, and the others accept to help. They take their positions in the jungle and Isabel notices movement among the trees with her scope, but the enemy isn't attacking them, so Royce thinks they may know about the traps. They change the arrangement and use Edwin as snare, so he goes through the wilderness until the foe starts pursuing them. Isabel utilizes her rifleman abilities to kill the tracker. Then the gathering approaches the body to find it's anything but a hunter, however really one more casualty from the enclosures. Nonetheless, this isn't the animal she killed. In light of the fact that she's missed and her shot is on a tree, unexpectedly they begin hearing a voice and somebody shows up behind Royce utilizing a shrouding gadget. The tracker removes his veil and uncovers he isn't a hunter, he's really Another human called Noland who advises them to be less clearly to try not to be heard by the trackers. Noland has heard the gathering since they showed up, and in the wake of calling attention to a tempest is coming, he presents to them generally back to his refuge, which is in an old broken transport. Noland likewise used to be in the military and was dropped here in a container 10 seasons back, turning into the main survivor from that clump. From that point forward he remained stowed away and made do by rummaging from the hunters, and their casualties being here has clearly negatively affected him on the grounds that occasionally he converses with a non-existent companion. Noland likewise knows a couple of things about the hunter since he's killed a few. The gathering continues to stroll for some time, and Royce investigates the couple of hints he needs to think about how the foe acts. This tracker believes them should run, so Royce figures they ought to follow the canine tracks and get to the tracker first. Minutes after the fact, the gathering sees as a camp and is nauseated by the frightening sight. The groups of different various races are holding tight stakes, and the ground is covered with the remaining parts of different animals, affirming that not just people are brought to this planet as prey. At the rear of the camp they're stunned to find an immense monstrous animal attached to a stake known as a hunter. While Royce sees that Isabel is having a bizarre response to it, Nikolai draws nearer and jabs the outsider with his weapon just for the animal to thunder at them since it's really alive. Isabel says they ought to leave right away. However, Edwin sees Royce has gone out of nowhere. A lot of lances jump out and kill Mombasa, making Royce rush out from the shadows and begin terminating fiercely. Different folks help him, and such a tremendous influx of slugs uncovers that the tracker is likewise a hunter utilizing a shrouding gadget. The gathering starts taking off as the hunter takes shots at them with lasers, causing blasts and flares out of control. As they escape, the gathering winds up, moving down a slope and tumbling off a precipice into a stream. They begin swimming to somewhere safe and secure, uninformed that a robot identifies their area and returns it to the camp, where it's uncovered that there are a sum of 3 hunting hunters. When the gathering is protected in a cavern, Isabel hits Royce for involving them as trap. Notwithstanding, Royce doesn't think twice about it, since now they at last realize who is after them, and a few insights concerning their solidarity and hunting techniques. Then at that point Royce faces Isabel about her response to the hunter, saying she probably seen one preceding. Isabel concedes she's heard a story saying that outsiders that seemed as though these ones were seen in 1987 in